The Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power plant, more commonly known as Chernobyl, stood as a testament to Soviet ambition. Located near the newly built city of Pripyat in northern Ukraine, it was one of the largest and most modern nuclear facilities in the Soviet Union. Construction began in the 1970s, part of a grand vision to harness atomic power for peaceful purposes, providing electricity to millions. The plant boasted 4 operational RBMK-1000 reactors, with 2 more under construction. These reactors were a specific Soviet design, powerful and capable of producing significant amounts of energy. Pripyat itself was a model city, an Atomograd, built to house the plant's workers and their families, offering a high standard of living by Soviet measures, complete with good schools, recreational facilities, and well-stocked shops. It represented progress and the bright future promised by nuclear science. The Chernobyl station was not just a power plant, it was a symbol of technological prowess. The engineers and operators were considered an elite group, highly trained and dedicated to their work. They believed in the safety and reliability of their reactors, a belief fostered by the state, which often downplayed any potential risks associated with nuclear energy. The RBMK reactor specifically was a graphite-moderated, water-cooled reactor, a design unique to the Soviet bloc, and one that differed significantly from the pressurized water reactors common in Western countries. This design, while powerful, harbored inherent characteristics that, under specific conditions, could lead to instability, a fact not fully appreciated or communicated to the plant's operational staff. The daily hum of the turbines and the glow of lights in Pripyat were constant reminders of its silent, immense power. Life in Pripyat was idyllic for many of its nearly 50,000 residents. It was a young city, with an average age of around 26. Children played in its clean streets, and families enjoyed outings to the nearby Pripyat River and lush forests. The promise of a stable job at the plant, good pay, and modern amenities drew people from across the Soviet Union. The plant was the heart of the community, its rhythm dictating the pace of life. Few questioned the colossal neighbor that provided their livelihood and comfort. The very idea of a catastrophic accident seemed remote, almost impossible, within such a controlled and seemingly secure environment. This confidence was a product of its time and the prevailing ideology of technological infallibility. The reactors themselves were massive structures, complex feats of engineering. Reactor number 4, the newest of the operational units, had come online in 1983 and was considered to be performing well. It, like its siblings, was a source of national pride and a key component in the Soviet energy grid. The control rooms were filled with dials, switches, and blinking lights, monitored around the clock by shifts of operators. These individuals were responsible for managing the immense forces contained within the reactor core, a task that required skill, precision, and unwavering attention. However, the system they managed had hidden vulnerabilities that would soon be tragically exposed to the entire world, changing perceptions of nuclear power forever. The quiet confidence of early April 1986 was about to be shattered. On the night of April 25, 1986, the operators at Chernobyl's reactor number 4 were preparing for a seemingly routine safety test. The test was designed to determine if, in the event of a station blackout, the plant's turbines, as they spun down from residual steam pressure, could generate enough electricity to power the reactor's emergency core cooling system pumps until the backup diesel generators kicked in. This was a crucial safety feature, intended to prevent a core meltdown during a power failure. The test had been attempted before on other RBMK units, but without entirely successful results, and modifications had been made to the system at Unit 4. This particular test had been scheduled to coincide with a routine shutdown of the reactor for maintenance, making it appear an opportune moment. However, the planned test soon ran into complications. It was initially scheduled for the afternoon of April 25th, during the day shift, which was more experienced. But a regional power station unexpectedly went offline, and the Kiev grid controller requested Chernobyl to delay the shutdown of reactor number 4 to meet electricity demands. This delay pushed the test into the late night and early morning hours of April 26th, meaning a new, less experienced night shift, under the supervision of Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov, would have to carry it out. This shift change introduced an element of unfamiliarity with the precise test procedures, which were already complex and, as it turned out, inadequately documented regarding safety precautions for the RBMK at very low power levels. The test procedure required the reactor's power output to be gradually reduced to between 700 and 1,000 megawatts thermal. However, due to the operational delay, and then a subsequent error by an operator, the power plummeted far below the intended level, dropping to around 30 megawatts thermal. At such low power, the RBMK reactor becomes very unstable due to a buildup of xenon-135, a neutron absorber. Recovering power from this xenon pit is a difficult and dangerous maneuver. Despite the dangerously low power level, Dyatlov insisted the test proceed, reportedly pressuring the operators to raise the power. This decision set a dangerous course, overriding concerns from some of the control room staff who were wary of operating the reactor in such an unstable state. To increase the reactor's power and overcome the xenon poisoning, operators began withdrawing a large number of control rods from the core, far more than safety regulations permitted. Control rods are essential for regulating the nuclear chain reaction. Removing them increases reactivity. By the time the reactor's power had been partially stabilized at around 200 megawatts thermal, still well below the prescribed safe minimum for the test, most of the control rods were out of the core. This left the reactor in an extremely precarious condition, with very little margin for safety. The operators also disabled several critical automatic safety systems, believing they might interfere with the test, a decision that would prove catastrophic when the situation began to unravel. The RBMK 1000 reactor, the type used at Chernobyl, possessed several inherent design characteristics that contributed significantly to the disaster. These were not widely known, or their full implications were not understood, by the operators who ran the plants daily. One of the most critical flaws was its positive void coefficient. In simple terms, this meant that if cooling water turned into steam bubbles, or voids, within the reactor core, the nuclear chain reaction would actually increase, rather than decrease as it does in most Western reactor designs. This created a dangerous feedback loop. More steam meant more reactivity, which meant more heat, leading to even more steam. This characteristic made the reactor potentially unstable, especially at low power levels, the very conditions present during the ill-fated test. Another significant design issue concerned the control rods. These rods, made of neutron-absorbing material like boron carbide, were designed to be inserted into the core to slow down or stop the chain reaction. However, the RBMK control rods had graphite tips. When the rods were initially inserted into the core from their fully withdrawn position, these graphite tips would displace water, a neutron absorber, before the boron carbide section entered the reactive zone. Graphite is a neutron moderator, meaning it slows down neutrons, which can actually increase reactivity in certain parts of the core for a brief period. This positive scram effect meant that pressing the emergency shutdown button, Arizona 5, could counterintuitively cause a momentary power surge before shutting the reactor down, particularly in an already unstable reactor. Furthermore, the RBMK reactor was physically enormous and complex, lacking a full containment structure of the kind mandated in most Western nuclear power plants. Western designs typically feature a robust, sealed building made of steel-reinforced concrete, designed to trap radioactive materials in the event of a severe accident. The Chernobyl reactor building was not designed to withstand the forces of the kind of explosion that occurred. Its roof was made of combustible materials. This lack of adequate containment meant that once the reactor was breached, there was little to prevent the massive release of radioactive substances directly into the atmosphere, a failing that would have devastating consequences for the surrounding environment and beyond. The Soviet nuclear industry had a culture of secrecy, and information about potential design flaws or operational difficulties with RBMK reactors was not always shared effectively, even among its own engineers and operators. Reports of previous incidents or near misses at other RBMK plants, which might have highlighted these vulnerabilities, were often suppressed or not widely circulated. This meant that the operators at Chernobyl, on that fateful night, were working with an incomplete understanding of the beast they were trying to tame. They were unaware that under the specific, highly unusual conditions they had created, their reactor was primed for a catastrophic power excursion, and that the very systems designed to save it could, in fact, trigger its destruction. This lack of knowledge was a critical component of the unfolding tragedy. The decision to proceed with the safety test despite the reactor being in an unstable low-power state was the first in a series of critical human errors. Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov, who was overseeing the test, was known for his demanding and often abrasive management style. He reportedly dismissed the concerns of junior operators who were hesitant about the reactor's condition. This pressure to continue, overriding standard safety protocols and operational common sense, created an environment where procedural violations became almost inevitable. The operators were caught between following the explicit instructions of a superior and adhering to the reactor's operational regulations, a difficult position for any team, especially one working under the stress of a delayed and complex experiment during a night shift. To raise the reactor power from its dangerously low level after the initial undershoot, operators withdrew an excessive number of control rods. Safety regulations stipulated that a minimum number of rods, known as the minimum operational reactivity margin, must always remain in the core to ensure the reactor could be quickly shut down if necessary. On the night of the accident, this margin was reduced to a fraction of the permissible level. The operators were essentially running the reactor with almost no brakes. This was a direct violation of safety procedures, but it was done in a desperate attempt to stabilize the power at the 200 megawatts thermal level, deemed, incorrectly, acceptable for starting the test, a level still far too low for the RBMK's safe operation during such a dynamic experiment. Crucially, several key automatic safety systems were deliberately disabled by the operators. They bypassed the emergency core cooling system to prevent it from activating during the test, as they believed its intervention would invalidate the experiment's results. They also disabled other automatic shutdown mechanisms linked to steam drum water levels and steam pressure. While the test procedure itself, poorly written as it was, may have implicitly required some of these actions, the operators were essentially stripping the reactor of its automated defenses. This left the reactor almost entirely reliant on manual control in a highly volatile state, a gamble that assumed everything would proceed exactly as planned, with no unexpected surges or problems, an assumption that proved fatally wrong. Communication in the control room was also a factor. While the operators were skilled technicians, the unfolding situation was unprecedented. The reactor was behaving erratically, with power fluctuations that were difficult to interpret. The pressure to complete the test, combined with the inherent complexities of the RBMK at low power and the disabled safety systems, created a recipe for disaster. There was an apparent lack of a clear understanding of the profound risks they were taking. Each decision, each deviation from standard procedure, seemed logical in isolation to those trying to fulfill the test objectives under Dyatlov's stern oversight. But collectively, they pushed reactor number 4 inexorably towards its catastrophic failure step by misguided step. Section 5. Midnight detonation, the reactor's fury. At 1:23 and 4 seconds a.m. on April 26, 1986, the operators initiated the rundown test. The steam supply to the turbine connected to generator number 8 was shut off, simulating the power outage scenario. As the turbine began to coast down, the power to 4 of the main circulating pumps decreased, reducing the flow of coolant water through the reactor core. In a normally functioning RBMK reactor at sufficient power, this reduction in coolant flow would be manageable. However, in reactor number 4, already in a highly unstable condition with most control rods withdrawn and operating at low power, the effect was dramatically different. The reduced flow of water through the fuel channels led to increased boiling. Due to the RBMK's positive void coefficient, these additional steam bubbles caused a rapid increase in reactivity and power within the core. Within seconds, the reactor's power began to surge uncontrollably. Alarms started to sound in the control room, indicating a dangerous situation. Seeing the escalating power levels, at 1:23 and 40 seconds a.m., shift foreman Alexander Akimov made the decision to initiate an emergency shutdown by pressing the AZ5 button. This action was meant to insert all control rods, including the manual control rods and the emergency protection rods, fully into the core to halt the chain reaction. However, the flawed design of the control rods, specifically their graphite tips, produced a catastrophic, unintended consequence. As the rods began their descent, the graphite displacers entered the lower part of the core first, displacing water and causing a localized surge in reactivity in the bottom of the core before the neutron-absorbing boron carbide could take effect. This final, fatal power spike was immense. The reactor's power output rocketed to many times its design capacity in a fraction of a second. The intense heat generated caused a massive buildup of steam pressure within the fuel channels. The fuel elements ruptured, and small particles of hot fuel reacted with the cooling water, generating even more steam. This led to the first explosion, a powerful steam explosion, at approximately 1:23 and 44 seconds AM. This explosion was strong enough to lift the 2,000-ton upper biological shield, known as ELENA, to which the fuel channels were attached, severing all 1,661 fuel channels and destroying the top of the reactor. The core was now open to the atmosphere. A few seconds later, a second, much larger explosion occurred. The exact nature of this second explosion is still debated by scientists, but it is widely believed to have been a hydrogen explosion, or possibly a nuclear excursion of a different kind. The extreme temperatures from the first blast and the exposure of superheated graphite and zirconium fuel cladding to air and steam likely generated large quantities of hydrogen gas. When this hydrogen mixed with oxygen in the air, it ignited, resulting in a massive detonation that blew the reactor building apart. Chunks of incandescent graphite moderator, uranium fuel, and other radioactive debris were hurled high into the night sky, raining down on the surrounding plant buildings and starting numerous fires, most notably on the flammable bitumen roof of the adjacent turbine hall. Section 6. The immediate aftermath. A world turned upside down. The twin explosions tore through reactor number 4, unleashing a scene of unimaginable destruction and chaos. The reactor building was a ruin, its roof gone. One of its walls collapsed, exposing the glowing heart of the shattered reactor core to the night sky. A fierce fire, fueled by the graphite moderator within the core and the building's combustible materials, raged uncontrollably, spewing a deadly plume of radioactive smoke and particles high into the atmosphere. The air was filled with the acrid smell of burning material and an eerie metallic taste, a telltale sign of high radiation levels, though few present initially understood its grave significance. The ground around the stricken unit was littered with chunks of graphite, reactor components, and fuel assemblies, all intensely radioactive. Inside the surviving parts of the plant, confusion reigned. The operators in the Unit 4 control room were stunned, their instruments having gone haywire or blank. Initially, many could not comprehend the scale of what had just happened. Anatoly Dyatlov, despite the evidence of massive destruction reported by operators sent to survey the damage, initially refused to believe the reactor itself had been destroyed, insisting it was a hydrogen tank explosion in the emergency feed water system. This denial delayed a realistic assessment of the situation and the immediate response. Other plant workers, jolted awake by the blasts or seeing the fires, rushed towards the scene, unaware of the lethal, invisible danger they were running into. The power plant's emergency systems were crippled. The first call to the plant's fire station came at 1:28 a.m. Firefighters from Chernobyl's paramilitary fire station number 2, stationed at the plant, were the very first to arrive, followed shortly by crews from the nearby town of Pripyat. They saw flames leaping from the reactor building and the turbine hall roof. Their immediate priority was to extinguish these fires, particularly on the roof of the turbine hall, shared by Unit 3 and Unit 4, and to prevent the flames from spreading to the adjacent, still operational, reactor number 3. They battled the blazes with courage and determination, but they were equipped only with standard firefighting gear, utterly inadequate for a radiological inferno. They had no dosimeters to measure radiation and no understanding of the extreme radioactive hazard they faced. Meanwhile, in Pripyat, just a few kilometers away, most residents slept soundly, oblivious to the catastrophe unfolding nearby. Some were awakened by the explosions, mistaking them for thunder or an earthquake. Others saw a strange, beautiful glow in the sky above the power plant, a phenomenon later understood to be the ionization of air by intense radiation. The initial official response from plant management and local authorities was slow and muddled. There was no immediate public announcement of the accident, nor any instructions for the civilian population. The priority for the authorities seemed to be controlling information and downplaying the severity, a characteristic response in the Soviet system, but one that would have terrible consequences for the unprotected citizens of Pripyat and surrounding areas. Section 7. Baptism by Fire, the Courage of the First Responders. The firefighters who arrived at the Chernobyl plant in the early hours of April 26 faced a scene from hell. Lieutenant Volodymyr Pravik's crew from the Chernobyl plant's own fire station and Lieutenant Viktor Kibinok's crew from Pripyat were among the first on the scene. They saw the collapsed roof of Reactor Unit 4, and the raging fires on what remained of it, and the adjacent turbine hall. Their training was for conventional fires. Nothing could have prepared them for the invisible enemy of radiation. They climbed onto the heavily damaged, intensely radioactive roof of the turbine hall, dragging hoses and battling blazes fed by bitumen and burning debris ejected from the reactor core. They were working in areas where radiation levels were astronomically high, enough to deliver lethal doses in minutes. These men displayed incredible bravery and self-sacrifice. They knew the importance of preventing the fire from spreading to Reactor Unit 3, which shared a common building with Unit 4 and was still operational. A fire spreading there could have led to an even greater catastrophe. They worked relentlessly for hours, ankle-deep in radioactive water, enveloped in radioactive smoke and dust. Many of them soon began to feel the acute effects of radiation sickness, intense nausea, vomiting, weakness, and what were described as nuclear tans. Radiation burns on their skin. Yet they continued to fight the fires until they were physically unable to stand or were ordered to retreat by superiors who began to grasp the radiological horror. By dawn, the most dangerous fires on the turbine hall roof were largely extinguished, preventing a greater disaster. However, the graphite fire within the reactor core itself continued to burn fiercely, releasing vast quantities of radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere. The initial group of 28 firefighters who tackled these blazes received massive doses of radiation. Within days, most of them would be airlifted to specialized hospitals in Kiev and Moscow, suffering from acute radiation syndrome, ARS. For many, including Pravik and Kibinok, these doses were fatal. They became symbols of the heroism displayed that night, but also tragic victims of an accident they were completely unequipped and uninformed to handle safely. Their sacrifice bought precious time and prevented an even worse outcome. Beyond the firefighters, many plant workers also acted heroically in the immediate aftermath. Engineers and technicians who remained at their posts or rushed back to the plant tried to understand the situation, manually operate emergency valves to supply cooling water to the damaged reactor, a futile but brave effort, and ensure the safety of the other undamaged reactor units. Men like Valery Kodymchuk, a pump operator, was believed to have died instantly in the initial explosions near the main circulation pumps in the reactor hall. His body never recovered. Vladimir Shashanok, an automatic systems adjuster, was found severely irradiated and burned, and died hours later in the Pripyat hospital. Their actions, and those of many others often unrecorded, were driven by a sense of duty in the face of an unprecedented and terrifying crisis. Section 8. The Invisible Scourge: Lasting Wounds on Health and Land. The Chernobyl disaster released a colossal amount of radioactive material into the atmosphere, estimated to be hundreds of times more than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. This radioactive plume, carrying isotopes like iodine-131, cesium-137, strontium-90 and plutonium, spread across vast swaths of Europe, with Belarus, Ukraine and Western Russia being the most heavily contaminated. The immediate health impact on those closest to the explosion, primarily the plant workers and first responders, was acute radiation syndrome, ARS. Over 130 individuals were confirmed with ARS, and dozens died within weeks or months from its devastating effects on their bodies, particularly bone marrow and gastrointestinal systems. In the longer term, one of the most significant health consequences observed has been an increase in thyroid cancer, especially among those who were children or adolescents at the time of the accident and lived in the most contaminated regions. Radioactive iodine-131, which has a relatively short half-life of 8 days, was absorbed through contaminated milk and leafy vegetables. It concentrated in the thyroid gland, leading to thousands of cases of thyroid cancer in the years that followed. While many of these cancers were treatable if detected early, the sheer number was a stark indicator of the widespread internal exposure. Other long-term health studies have explored potential increases in leukemia and other cancers, as well as cardiovascular diseases and cataracts among cleanup workers, liquidators, and affected populations, though the direct causal links and extent are subjects of ongoing research and debate. The environmental impact was catastrophic and enduring. An area of approximately 30 kilometers radius around the plant was designated as the exclusion zone, and its inhabitants, including the entire city of Pripyat, evacuated 36 hours after the explosion, were permanently relocated. This zone remains largely uninhabitable for humans due to high levels of radioactive contamination in the soil and vegetation. The red forest, a pine forest near the plant, turned a ginger-brown color and died shortly after the accident due to absorbing massive doses of radiation. Rivers and lakes were contaminated, impacting aquatic life. Agricultural lands over a much wider area were rendered unusable for years, and restrictions on farming and food consumption were put in place in many regions of Europe. Decades later, the Chernobyl exclusion zone has, paradoxically, become a unique wildlife refuge. With the absence of humans, populations of various animal species including wolves, deer, wild boar and even Przewalski's horses, reintroduced, have thrived. However, these animals still carry radioactive isotopes in their bodies, and the long-term genetic effects of chronic low-dose radiation exposure on these populations are still being studied by scientists. The landscape itself is slowly recovering, but the radionuclides, particularly cesium-137 and strontium-90 with half-lives of about 30 years, and plutonium isotopes with much longer half-lives, will persist in the environment for centuries, a silent, lingering reminder of the day the reactor blew. The cleanup and containment efforts continue to this day, with the new safe confinement structure now covering the old sarcophagus. Section 9. Echoes of Chernobyl, Lessons Forged in Disaster. The Chernobyl disaster served as a brutal and undeniable wake-up call for the global nuclear industry and for governments worldwide. One of the most immediate lessons was the critical importance of reactor safety design. The inherent flaws of the RBMK reactor, particularly its positive void coefficient and the faulty design of its control rods, were primary contributors to the accident. In the aftermath, significant safety upgrades were implemented at all remaining RBMK reactors in Russia and Lithuania to address these specific vulnerabilities, including modifications to control rods, enrichment of fuel, and the introduction of additional neutron absorbers, as well as improved shutdown systems. The disaster spurred a renewed focus on defense-in-depth principles and the necessity of robust containment structures for all nuclear power plants. Another profound lesson was the absolute necessity of fostering a strong safety culture within nuclear operations. The Chernobyl accident was not solely a result of flawed technology, human error, procedural violations, a lack of understanding of the reactor's behavior under extreme conditions, and a system that discouraged questioning authority all played significant roles. The disaster highlighted the need for rigorous operator training, clear and unambiguous safety protocols, independent regulatory oversight, and an environment where safety concerns can be raised and addressed without fear of reprisal. The Soviet system's penchant for secrecy and control over information proved disastrous, delaying effective response and exacerbating the consequences. Transparency and international cooperation became recognized as vital for nuclear safety. The international response to Chernobyl also underscored the transboundary nature of nuclear accidents. Radioactive fallout respected no national borders, affecting countries far from Ukraine. This led to greater international collaboration on nuclear safety standards, emergency preparedness, and the sharing of operational experience through organizations like the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. Conventions on early notification of a nuclear accident, and on assistance in the case of a nuclear accident or radiological emergency, were strengthened. The world learned that a nuclear accident anywhere is a concern for everyone, necessitating a collective approach to ensuring the safety of nuclear technology and managing its potential risks, effectively and openly. Finally, Chernobyl left an indelible mark on public perception of nuclear power. It fueled widespread anti-nuclear sentiment and led to a slowdown in the construction of new nuclear plants in many countries, and even the phase-out of nuclear power in some. The disaster highlighted the immense human and environmental cost of a worst-case scenario, forcing a re-evaluation of the risks versus benefits of nuclear energy. While nuclear power remains a significant source of low-carbon electricity for many nations, the shadow of Chernobyl continues to influence debates about its future. The legacy of that April night in 1986 is a complex tapestry of tragedy, heroism, environmental devastation, and hard-won lessons that continue to shape our approach to technology, safety, and our responsibility to future generations.